Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by Summer Moon Coffee. The Thunder is officially 2 games into the Western Conference Finals. The Thunder are also 2-0 against the Minnesota Timberwolves currently. We're recording this on Friday. It is May 23rd. So right after this podcast, we got to run to the airport because the next 2 games are going to be in Minnesota. But the Thunder getting out to a really strong start here in this series against the Timberwolves.
Yeah, the Thunder has played to its identity. We've talked about that phrase all season long. And in the midst of an 82-game season, that's definitely a compliment. It's like, okay, we played to our identity tonight. It's a little bit more like in doubt during the regular season where you have the travel and the ups and downs and the 3 games in 4 nights and all of that. But you do that, you lean into that so that when it comes to this time of the year, you have that at the ready and you're able to access it. And that's what we've seen from the Thunder in the series to this point. There's a long way to go in this series. We've seen many times where a team has gone up 2-0, even with the home court advantage, and suddenly they're coming back for a game 5 and it's tied at 2-2. So the Thunder's got to take care of some business on the road.
Yeah, job certainly not done, but a great start and really good indication of how this team is playing so far in these Western Conference Finals. So we're going to get into the flow of how this series has gone so far. We'll get into some more of the details, but first, let's talk about our Summer Moon stat of the week. Nick, I've been looking at your stat on this rundown now for about 10 minutes. I don't know. Just say it because I gotta think about it some more.
The stat is plus 28.
My natural thought is that this is either the Thunder's average points off turnover differential. That's the silence is so telling.
You're probably pretty. I mean, that number is pretty close for what you're guessing, but that's not what I'm going for.
Points in the paint.
Not points in the paint either.
Differential.
This is the Thunder's differential through 2 games of this Western Conference Finals in the third quarter. So plus 14 in game 1, plus 14 in game 2 in that third quarter.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And we often talk about that being such a critical period of time for teams as they come out of the halftime locker room. Shea and many other players have said that in last series against the Denver Nuggets, it was a point of emphasis because they did not play particularly well in those third quarters. That was a long series, 7-game series that they learned from. And to this point, they've shown that they can get better from as well, coming out of that locker room, having a renewed sense of purpose, vigor, execution. And the Thunder has used those 2 third quarters to springboard them to double-digit wins here in the postseason.
And specifically last night, the Thunder came out of that third quarter just firing on all cylinders. They went into halftime up by just 8 points. And the Thunder had not shot the ball well from the 3-point line up to that point. They were shooting well from the field, around 50%, but they were only up 8 points.
Yep.
And so their ability to create some separation really came down to the third quarter. Nick, you and I talked about this in our walkout, which you should be watching if you're on Thunder social media channels after every single game. Nick, you and I talked about it, but it wasn't one massive run for the Thunder in that third quarter.
Yep.
It was just death by paper cut of just this short burst of 5-0 runs. 5-0 runs by the Thunder. Chris Finch calls a timeout. Another 5-0 run. Chris Finch calls a timeout. And there were just these really backbreaking plays that the Thunder would do. Like, for example, Case and Wallace, just a quick, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they did that blitzing kind of 2-3 zone, a lot of pressure out top. One quick pass to Case and Wallace, steps into the shot with confidence, knocks down to 3. Next possession, Alex Caruso comes up with a loose ball, picks up a steal, and it leads to a dunk by Chet Holmgren on the other end of the floor. That's just 5 quick points, but the crowd was roaring, the arena was shaking, and by that point, the Thunder just started to stack those sort of little mini 5-0 bursts to get this plus 14 margin in the third quarter.
Right. And, you can kind of marry those little segments together and you eventually get like a 14-4 run or something like that. And that's what really, can help propel you in these types of games and series. And on the flip side, I think the way that the Thunder followed that up in the fourth quarter where Minnesota really had a renewed sense of urgency, OKC didn't allow for those runs by Minnesota to become the extended ones that force you to suddenly become in a possession game late in the game. OKC had a few answers. They got some easy stuff around the rim. They made some hustle plays in transition and on the glass for second chances to just kind of quell those runs and not allow them to become 9-0, but to make them 6-2 instead of an 11-2 or something like that. And so those little plays were able to just keep Minnesota at bay long enough that there was no purpose in even like trying to play the foul game at the end of that one. OKC able to just finish things out strongly. And compared to game one, that fourth quarter was a little bit more of a challenge for OKC in game two. But I think a really nice reminder of what's coming up for them in game 3 and game 4 out in Minneapolis.
Yeah, definitely going to be ready for a big response from Minnesota. So the Thunder did a really good job executing down the stretch of that game. You ready for my stat of the week?
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
7 of 15.
7 of 15. 7 of 15.
This is kind of a doozy. This is kind of like yours.
So I'm thinking this maybe has something to do with like Jalen Williams in the fourth quarters of these couple games.
Jalen Williams certainly contributed to this.
Okay.
This is the Thunder's mid-range shooting percentage in game 2.
All right.
This was a big kind of factor to how Oklahoma City was able to break down Minnesota's defense, because Minnesota, we anticipated seeing more zone from them, and we did, especially in the second half of this game. But Oklahoma City, to their credit, very, very well executed possessions where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just shredded it, got to the mid-range, surgical precision in that way. Jalen Williams had a couple of them. He was 2 for 2 in the mid-range in that game. And then a guy like Alex Caruso as well. I think his actually counted maybe towards points in the paint, because I think technically he was in the lane.
Yeah.
But he also found a couple of those just right there in the middle of the zone, right there in the center. And the Thunder getting really, really quality looks in that area. And I thought that was a really telling sign of something that Coach Dagnall said, which is we're understanding more and more game after game how to attack Minnesota's defense. And that this is something that we've seen all postseason long, where the Thunder's just literally learning in real time and applying those lessons.
Well, and Mark Dagnall has always talked about the Thunder wanting to have a good blend on offense. And that's not necessarily prescribing ahead of time in a game that you want to have a certain number of shots at the rim and a certain number of shots in the mid-range and from behind the arc. But basically enough of a mix of all of them that the defense is not sure exactly what's coming next, or not sure what you're willing to take on each given possession. 7 of 15, just a scrape below 50%.
Yep.
When you're playing a defense the caliber of Minnesota's, you're going to take that, especially on a night when your 3-point shots aren't falling at a high clip. And so to be able to just keep the scoreboard moving, that goes into kind of what I was saying about how the Thunder handled that fourth quarter was, I'm sitting there thinking, when the Thunder's got maybe a 16-point lead, 15-point lead, and I think it's 99 to 81 or something like that, 83, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, OKC need to just get to like 108 here in this game. They got to just, they've got to be able to just move the scoreboard enough to prevent Minnesota from being able to score enough to make this a 2 or 3 possession game inside of the final minute and a half. OKC was able to do that through some finishes down low by Chet, and those extra possessions on mid-range shots by J-Dub and Shai, just to get to their spots and confidently knock them down.
Yeah, and the thing that we saw particularly from Shai, and we're going to talk about him more in a little bit, but the way he was able to get to his spots in this game in particular, finished with 38 points. And it was just pure Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, what we've seen from him all season long. He wasn't pressing. Mind you, he just got the Michael Jordan trophy right before tip-off of this game. And yet he went out there and had a beautiful blend, like Coach Dagnall talks about, getting downhill, getting to the rim, but also so precise and executing so well in that mid-range, knocking down those jumpers with so much smooth swag that we've seen from him all season long. And it was just beautiful to see, and I think just really led to Oklahoma City just chip by chip breaking down that Minnesota defense. And it was really, really telling, especially in the second half.
Yeah, and you mentioned Shai earning that MVP award, receiving the trophy inside Paycom Center, roars from the arena, and then he follows it up with an MVP level performance with the 38 points. So I definitely want to spend some time talking about these last 48 hours for the Thunder, where we get to hear this incredible heartfelt speech by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He breaks down a little bit in a side of himself that people don't usually get to see, but people around him and the Thunder, they get to see behind the scenes. What a sweet and tender and loving, amazing person that he is, and how much he cares for his teammates and obviously his family and the people close to him. And then, he gets to have this moment at midcourt. A guy that he played with here in OKC who had a massive formative role in how this team was able to take, a stride forward into the next iteration of this group. Chris Paul sitting courtside, and he's able to receive the award, and then he goes out and he has just an absolutely impeccable game. When you look at, the final stat sheet there, 38, 3, 8, and 3 steals on 12 of 21 shooting.
Yeah.
I mean,
only one turnover.
Only one turnover. That's an MVP level performance.
I mean, to play 42 minutes in that game, only have one turnover, pick up 3 steals, and have 38 points. That's why he's the MVP of this league. This is what we've seen from Shai all season long. And to your point about his speech on Wednesday, because that's when the announcement came out. He went on TNT. He had his moment with his teammates, and that was so special that everyone, got a chance to be a part of that moment with Shai, because the first words out of his mouth when he got up to the podium and he spoke to, the crowd at the Thunder Ion was, first and foremost, I have to give a shout out to my teammates. I can't do this without them. That's who Shai is. And Coach Dagnall says Shai is one of the rare people that wants to be one of the greats, but is also just one of the guys too. He does such a great job of rallying his teammates, empowering them, but also lifting them up as he goes. And that's why this team is so great, because he's not taking the air out of the ball. I mean, he had 27 field goal attempts, and no, sorry, that's game 1. He had, let me double check here. 21 field goal attempts in game 2. And that left a lot of room open for other guys to get opportunities and knock down shots as well. And you look at the trajectory of his teammates over the course of this season. Jalen Williams, J-Dub, a better player now than he was at the start of the season. Yeah, you got a guy like, Cason Wallace. Lou Dort is all defensive team. We'll talk about him in a second too. Chet Holmgren. All of these guys have gotten better over the course of the season. And you can only do that if your star player is out here empowering them, but also leaving space for them to be great too.
Yeah, Lou and these guys have been such great partners alongside Shai through all of this. And of course, Shai putting them in positions to succeed in his role as a team leader, him shouting them out was just so natural. And I got to shout out my teammate too, because you hosted that event, the MVP award event at the Thunder Ion, and you did a marvelous job. I mean, I told you afterwards, 100 out of 100, perfection, no notes. What was that like for you to have that moment and to be able to welcome Shai up on the stage?
Biggest pinch me moment of my career, I think, but also recognizing that this was such a big moment for Shai. And my job in that moment was to make sure everybody in that room recognized the gravity of what we're witnessing, because to have an MVP come through your city and do what Shai is doing, be the person that he is, and now he's recognized while this team is in the Western Conference Finals. This is rare. Yeah. This is special, and you have to just kind of sit here, be present, and recognize it. And so to be able to be a part of that, very small part of that, for Shai in that day was very, very special. And I still can't believe that it happened, honestly. It's one of those things that you remember for a long time. Just like in the arena, Thunder fans are going to remember that iconic, picture of Shai holding up that Michael Jordan trophy at half court.
Yeah, I mean, wonderful moments. And in that basically 18-hour span, we also had news about Lou Dort being named to the all defensive team, the first team, second team all defensive team for Jalen Williams. Those two guys obviously very deserving. Lou has been deserving for many years now, and great to see him rewarded, particularly in a year where this Thunder team was a historically great defense and is backing that up here in the postseason.
I love what J-Dub said. We talked to him. It was either pregame of game 2 or at practice. I can't remember. But he said, I feel like Lou should just be listed 3 times on the all defensive team, because he's been deserving for several years now. And to put into context just how great this Thunder defense is, if you watch this podcast, you've heard all of this before. But the reason the Thunder is so good defensively, the fact that they've only allowed 12 opponents to have a 30-point game against them this season, that leads the NBA. For context, the second closest team was the Toronto Raptors, who allowed 21 opponents to have 30-point games against them. Obviously, the number one defense in the NBA, number one defensive rating. They led the league in deflections, steals, all of the metrics that lead to good defense. The Thunder shined in all of those areas. The biggest key here is that the Thunder's defense led to that historic point differential that Oklahoma City had this season of not simply outscoring their opponents, but the possession battle. They just simply eliminated opportunities for teams to ever score to begin with because of this elite defense. And honestly, you look at, Lou Dort, who made all defensive first team, J-Dub, all defensive second team, and you look at the rest of this Thunder roster and you think to yourself, wow, you could make a case for about seven more of these guys, too. Mm-hmm. A guy like Cason Wallace, who has continued to show those defensive chops, who comes in alongside Lou Dort and is just an amazing perimeter on-ball defender. And then a guy like Alex Caruso, who's also just an incredible ball hawk as well. Chet Holmgren certainly would have made this conversation as well if he would have made the games required. But that's what makes an elite defensive team, is this just compounding, great player upon great player on the defensive end of the floor.
And we've seen it show up in the two areas that the Thunder really prioritizes, which is protecting the paint. Mm-hmm. OKC is plus 52 in the paint so far through two games in this series. And then pressure. And a stat that reflects that pressure is the points off turnovers. Obviously, we've talked many times on this podcast about that not being the end goal. The Thunder's not seeking out the ends. What they're seeking is the means, which is applying pressure. But the result so far has been 53 points off turnovers that the Thunder has scored so far in the series.
I want to talk about that because that's been a huge key for Oklahoma City against the Timberwolves. The defensive pressure, massive. In game one, 31 points off turnovers. And then in game two, 22. Yep. And so the Thunder's defense, obviously very disruptive for Minnesota, but where it's really telling is specifically in Minnesota's shooting percentage. And they'll turn the ball over, but they also only shot 28% from the three-point line in game two. And in game one, guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, these guys that typically bring a big punch off the bench and guys who were very capable of getting hot from behind the three-point line, they were not a factor in game one of this series. And so for Oklahoma City, that defensive pressure, massive, especially given the fact that in the first half of game one, they didn't have much of anything going offensively.
The defense definitely kept OKC in the game in the first half, and you just see some of these possessions where, basically the Thunder just does an expert job of using midcourt and the sideline as a sixth defender and just, maintaining that pressure and keeping guys on their back foot. The turnovers on entry passes have been really amazing to see how the Thunder just swoops in from the backside as maybe an initial defender is fronting the post on a player like Julius Randle. And we've seen over the first two games, Shea and J-Dub and many others come flying in on the backside to pick that ball as it comes in over the top. And those plays often lead to runouts on the other end, where we've seen Cason Wallace and Chet Holmgren in particular be really electric in the open floor. Mm-hmm. Those two guys have formed a really nice partnership, seen some alley-oops, and seen some even just like ground level plays between those two guys to just make things happen. It's really amazing to see that the Thunder can go from a series where they had to play double big for a significant period of time against the Denver Nuggets, and then suddenly flip that in game 7 and have Alex Caruso as your center and playing sort of a smaller ball lineup, to now here in this Minnesota series where they've started with the double bigs, but they've often found themselves playing significant amount of time with either just Isaiah Hartenstein or just Chet Holmgren. Yeah. But those guys can run so well that they can still maintain pace and tempo even when they have one of those bigs on the floor. And then there's these electric lineups where the Thunder goes super small that we've seen OKC use a few times as well, including as a closing lineup in game 1. I thought that was a really nice, clever wrinkle by Mark Daigneault to say, okay, here's our Mariano Rivera. We're bringing in this lineup to make sure that you guys cannot get back into this game.
Yeah, the amount of pitches that the Thunder can throw, this is what this has all been about. They've been collecting these, working on these throughout the regular season so that they can roll them out with confidence. This isn't the first time they've done this. They've been working on this all season long. Even over the last couple of seasons, we've seen them roll out these sort of lineups. And now rolling them out with confidence, and they're obviously very successful. This brings me to my last point, and a big theme from this series that I wanted to talk about that I don't think it's talked about enough. You go from a marathon of a series in the Western Conference semifinals against the Denver Nuggets that goes a full 7 games. That felt like we were playing the Nuggets for 2 months.
Yeah.
It was very strange.
Do you remember being in Memphis at all?
That was this year? I don't know. It really doesn't feel like it. But you go from playing the Denver Nuggets for what felt like an eternity. You have 1 day off on Monday. 1 day off. And then you go straight into the Western Conference Finals, game 1, against an all-new opponent with an all-new set of challenges in the Minnesota Timberwolves. And what we saw in the first half of that game against Minnesota, Coach Dagnall said, we needed some time to really calibrate to this new opponent. We were really good at playing against Denver, and now we had to flip the script and get used to playing against Minnesota. So the Thunder, they didn't have their fastball in that first half of that game. But to your point about the third quarters, the Thunder learning in real time, understanding their opponent, applying those lessons, getting back to 0-0 in the middle of a basketball game. It's one thing to get back to 0-0 after you lose game 1 or after you win game 1. But when you can go back and watch film and talk about it with your teammates and go over it with, against a scout team. But this is halftime. You've got 15 minutes to get it together and learn these lessons. And the Thunder are so good at this, their ability to take information in, process it, and spit it out with a solution.
Yeah, and they're going to now have to turn around and do this in a very similar way, going on the road up 2-0. They've got to get back to 0-0 and recognize that the emotions got nothing to do with it. The emotion of riding high because of external accolades, the being up in a series, like none of that matters if the Timberwolves are able to take 2 games right back on the road. So, and OKC has to also, and they do. They've all talked about it here in the post games that they recognize that Minnesota's shooting is going to be better at home. Their comfort level is going to be better at home. The turnovers will probably be down at home. Their role players will play better at home as well. And for OKC, the pressure is going to be on them in a different way on the road. And they've done an amazing job of handling that all season long. They've been sort of out in front in terms of the standings and all of these external things from the beginning of the season, but they've been so laser focused on what they can control day to day. It's why Shea is the MVP. It's why they have 68 wins plus 10 more so far in this postseason. And so they're going to have to kind of do what got them there, as our guy Michael Cage would say. Bring the girl you brought to the dance.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's exactly. Yeah. And just this last question before we get into what's brewing here. What do you anticipate being top of mind for Oklahoma City, in addition to the composure and the poise required going into enemy territory up 2-0? In terms of, what the Thunder can bring defensively, what was working offensively, what do you anticipate being top of mind in Game 3?
Well, Minnesota showed that they're willing to go to some different things throughout the series, too. They didn't play Rudy Gobert or Julius Randle in the fourth quarter of Game 2 hardly at all.
Good point.
And so they went a lot smaller. They tried a few other things as well with getting Anthony Edwards actually off the ball to begin possessions, and then trying to generate some switches in one-on-one situations off of that, and trying to draw second defenders in more of an off-ball capacity, and then be able to flip back. So OKC maybe has some things to orient around, and also Minnesota got a little bit of momentum in that fourth quarter. Mark Dagnall always says momentum rarely carries over game to game, but rhythm sometimes can. And so for the Thunder, they've got to be ready to both deliver punches and be resilient through punches on the road, recognizing that they're going to see some things different in terms of the execution on offense by Minnesota, the shot making on offense, and then also, just to be frank, the physicality by Minnesota defensively. I mean, I think there's going to be a recognition that you can't take any fouls home with you. And so I think that we're going to see a renewed sense of physicality from Minnesota at home.
And recognizing Chris Finch is a great head coach, a great tactician. So he's definitely figuring all of this out right now, processing all of this to figure out how to break down that Thunder defense. Going to try to scheme some stuff up. Oklahoma City certainly going to be ready for that as they head into Minnesota for Game 3. Let's get into what's brewing for Oklahoma City. It is 2 games on the road out in Minneapolis. Game 3 takes place on Saturday at 7:30. You can catch that game on ABC. And then on Monday, Game 4 in Minneapolis as well, also at 7:30, and that game will be on ESPN. So be sure to tune in. And then post-game, tune into KSBI or the Thunder app, and you can watch me and Royce Young and our very own Nick Gallo on the Thunder playoff post-game show. So a lot happening for Oklahoma City, and they've been in this situation before. And if you can remember all the way back to the Memphis series where you're up 2-0, you go out on the road against a Grizzlies team that is hungry, their back's against the wall, they're in their home arena now, and to Memphis's credit, they got up by, I believe, 29 points in that game. And the Thunder, they had to fight out of a really big hole in that one.
Yeah, had to scratch and claw. You're going to have to scrape for everything that you get as this series goes along. This Minnesota team has great pride. They've been in this round before. Just last year, they played in the Western Conference Finals. So this is not new to them. This is not uncharted territory for OKC. They're continuing to embrace all of these experiences that they're getting for the first time. Our great Matt Bishop just reminded me that this is the first time that the Thunder organization has been up 2-0 in a Western Conference Finals.
Wow.
So there's all sorts of things that this young franchise is still experiencing for the first time, but this group has made a habit of taking those things head on, embracing them, doing it together, competing together. That's what they're going to need to do here on the road in a hostile environment.
That Thunder identity's got to be super strong, especially going out on the road to Minneapolis. And we got to hit the road too, because
plane's taking off
soon. So that wraps us up here today. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up and catch you later.